Welcome back to part 2 of our series where we are talking about how to use the Power BI REST API from Python. So in our previous video, we walked through just what is Power BI, kind of how is it used by different enterprises. We then talked a little bit about what the purpose of the REST API is used for, so how it's used to interact with different services, how it's used to manipulate resources in existing dashboard or different data sets. And then we walk through registering an app that would allow you to access that REST API. And once we had the information of our application, we went through the authentication protocol so that way we could get access to an access token and a refresh token. We also talked about how to install the library that I built for the Power BI API in Python. So that way, if you don't want to write all of this from scratch, you can just leverage that code and then get up and running relatively quickly. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about two different topics. The first topic is about the dashboard resource. So this is going to be the first object we're going to be talking about inside of the REST API. And then we're going to talk about a very common thing that most people probably want to do, which is, hey, I have all this data. I want to push it to Power BI. How do I do that using the REST API? So we're also going to spend some time doing that, but we're going to first start talking about dashboards and how to manipulate a resource. So this will at least give us a foundation, give us at least an overview about kind of how objects are organized and some common terminology. Now, I did delete my old application from the previous video, so I am now using the current one that is on my system. People don't have access to that one, so the other one, you can go and try to use a client ID and everything. It ain't going to work because guess what? It's been deleted. All right, so couple things. My library is great, but there's also tons of documentation on on this topic as well. So if you go to the Power BI REST API documentation, you can go into some detail about each of the objects and resources that are at your disposal. So don't be afraid to read this. I read this all the time. You will find that there are certain operations that are available on the API that are not in my library. So the library is still a work in progress and there's still lots of work to be done. So not all of it is finished. Okay, let's do this. So this is code that's similar to the one that we talked about in the previous video. So basically how I have my library organized is you always start with your Power BI client. So this is your entry point into the different services. So if you ever expand this Power BI folder, you're going to notice that there are different files. Each file is supposed to represent a service. So if I go to dashboards, you will see my dashboards resource, and you will see all the operations that fall under that resource. I try to do my best to document it and give you examples on how to use these particular resources along with some sample files as well. So feel free to play around with these ones. If you have recommendations on improving them or whatever it might be, I'm always open to hearing that. So the way you need to think about it is you always use your client to access your resource. So in this case, dashboard service is found in my Power BI client. And then I go into my dashboards method. This will return my particular client. And then you also see there are examples on how to do this. So grab my dashboard service. A lot of the services have like a get operation, and that get operation allows you to get different resources. So let's just say I want to get all the dashboards that fall under my account or my workspace. Then I would call the get dashboards method. And then I'm going to put this up a little bit, right click, run Python file in terminal. Beautiful. So you will now see I have a list of my dashboards. They usually have a display name. They have an embed URL. This usually just takes you like a blank page sometimes. I'm pretty sure it's because it's like nothing on the actual dashboard a lot of the times. They have an ID. This is important if you want to access other objects that are inside of a particular dashboard. It will also give you some attributes like, is it read only? Are there users? You can get a web URL that will redirect you to that dashboard. So this is one I built in a previous run. There's nothing in it, so naturally it comes up blank. And then it does come back in the list if you have multiple dashboards. Okay. Another important concept is you're going to hear this term called groups, at least from the REST API perspective. A group is simply a workspace, and a workspace is simply a place where you can store a collection of dashboards and other resources. So if you're on the web API, for example, and you go down to your little workspaces, you will see all the workspaces that fall under your account. So these are my workspaces. I have a Sigma coding one. I have a Sigma premium workspace. So this leverages my premium license so that way I can do more fun stuff with it. Now you have a default workspace called my workspace. So this one at the top, that's my workspace. That's the default one. Everybody gets that when they create a Power BI account. So a lot of times when you're calling certain endpoints, there's a difference between get dashboards and get group dashboards. Get group dashboards returns all the dashboards for a particular workspace, where if I just get dashboards, it returns the dashboards that fall under my workspace, so the default workspace. And you can denote that by me. If you see me, that means default or my workspace. Let's say I want to get all the dashboards that fall under the Sigma coding workspace. You'll notice that it says groups. And then I have this particular ID. This is a group ID. This is my workspaces. You can get this through a different service called groups, but for simplicity, I'm just going to copy it and then run this code again. So I'm going to say, let's do this. Let's add a dashboard. So we'll show you how to add a dashboard in a particular group. So normally you give your dashboard a name. I will call this my new dashboard for video. Nothing fancy. And then you need to provide me a group ID. Well, we already have that group ID, so that's simple. So this will add a new dashboard, and then we're going to have a resource sent back to us with the information about that new resource. Okay, perfect. So we now see that we have a display name, the embed URL, the ID of our new dashboard. I'm going to copy that because I will need it later. And then I also have that URL. So if I click it and I go to it, I'm going to see this blank dashboard and it's going to be really, really boring. And then if I go to my workspace, I should also see my new dashboard for video. I have lots of different dashboards, as you can see. So lots of good stuff here. But that's basically getting dashboards and then adding dashboards from the REST API. Additionally, there are also objects inside of dashboards. One of those objects are called tiles. Tiles are denoted by little physical tiles on your dashboard. So I think I have it here. Okay, perfect. So this is a very simple tile. There's really nothing to it. It's pretty blank, but a tile usually has a data set associated with it. It has a title. There's a subtitle. There can be URLs associated with it. And you can also edit these particular tiles as well. And then additionally, you can also add, you can add tiles to it as well. So you can add a tile and you can say you want it to be a video. You could have it be a web content image, a text box. Maybe I want it to be a web content. And let's say, just for example, let's see, maybe is it this one that has like, I can't remember if this is the one. Some of these like, some of these are just prettier than other ones. And so if it's not pretty, I'm not gonna like show it. Let me see something. A lot of times with the embed code, it doesn't necessarily work all the way. We'll try this. Maybe that's not it. I don't know. Regardless. Anywho, so you can create a tile, you can embed content in those tiles, and there are different types of tiles. So you can see here, there are text boxes, web content, images, video, and then real-time streaming data. So like if I wanted a text box and say, my text box, and then I'll say apply, and then there you go. So now you have a little dashboard or a little tile, and it's pretty basic, nothing super fancy behind it. So if you want to access tiles from a dashboard, that's also pretty straightforward. It's nothing crazy complicated, actually. So I'm going to say dashboard service, and then you can get tiles. And then you can specify the dashboard ID. So I can say dashboard ID. And then if I wanted to, I can just basically take this particular one right here. I know that has some tiles on it. So let me grab that one. And let's see what we have returned back to us. Hey, we get some, tiles. So with the tile resource, there's a couple more attributes. There's a column span, a dataset ID that is associated with that tile. There's also a row span, an ID, and then also a tile as well. So depending on the type of tile you have, it will vary a little bit. So this one I'm pretty sure is my text box. So this one's not going to have like a dataset ID associated with it just because text boxes don't have a data set associated with it. So very important to keep that in mind. Tiles are different. So certain tiles are going to have other attributes where other ones won't. Another thing that you can also do with a tile is you can do what is called cloning it, or which is basically copying it to another location. So this one's also pretty cool as well because it's just calling the clone tile method. And then with this one, you just need there's 3 required parameters. There is a dashboard ID, a tile ID, and then a target dashboard ID. There's also some other ones as well, like target model ID. There is a target report ID, and then conflicts. So what happens if there's already a tile there that is like of the same name? You can specify what to have happen in those situations. So you can get very, very granular. So you can say, hey, I want to clone a tile linked to a data set, and I want to put it with a very specific model ID. So just keep that in mind. There's a little bit more that you can do with it. So this one's pretty interesting because you take the dashboard where the tile exists. So take that dashboard ID. Then you specify the tile that you want to clone. So in this situation, I'm going to copy this one, the one with the text box. And then I need to specify the target dashboard. So what is the target dashboard that I want to send this one to? No, I don't want that one. I want one that I know. We'll put it here. We'll put it on the new one we created. So I'll grab that one, and then I'll have a target dashboard ID. And then bam, we should have a new tile. Okay, that looks good. Let's see if it's in here. There it is. So there's our text box. So it looks like our tile was successfully cloned from our dashboard. So that's good. That's a good thing. It means it was working. So I'll stop there for the moment talking about dashboards and tiles. And now we'll move on to the next topic, which is data sets. So this is where things can kind of get, I'm not going to say complicated. It's just you got to keep tabs on things and making sure you're following along. So if we want to do operations like creating new data sets and then adding tables to that data set, then we're going to use the push datasets service. So we'll first initialize the push datasets service. So from here, we'll call it push dataset service. It will equal my Power BI client. and then we'll do push datasets. Let me think for a second. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about it. So datasets. If you want to access your datasets, you can go from your left-hand pane and you'll see a section denoted for datasets. So you can create new datasets from the REST API, but you need to define the tables that exist in that dataset. So if you could imagine a hierarchy, a dataset has tables in it, and those tables have columns and rows. And so the process of creating a new dataset is defining the dataset and then defining the tables that exist inside of that dataset. Now, datasets can be connected from many different sources. So datasets can be just raw JSON data if you want to build something yourself. You can also specify connected services like Azure SQL database. You could do Excel files. You could do lots of different stuff. So you got to be a little bit careful because that's where things get complicated. Depending on where the source of the data is coming from, that naturally could be impacting how your request is going to look. So I'm working on this a little bit more. I'm trying to give people objects that they can just fill out and then pass those objects through to the client, and then it will set up the JSON for you so that way you don't have to worry about it. That's the plan, at least. So let's go through and create just a very basic data set. This one, we're going to leverage some more what we'll call utilities from the Power BI library. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say from Power BI utils, import a table. And then from here, we're going to also do some other things as well. In fact, I'm going to keep that closed because it's a little bit easier to read. Tables have columns, and then tables belong to data sets. So we have a data set. And then columns can also have data types, but those are found in the enums. So from your enums, you can get your column data types. So from here, you can create a new table object. So you would say create a new table object. We will say table sales info. It will be a new table. Your table will have a name, and then we'll say sales table info. Okay, so we've defined a table. We're now going to define some columns, and then we'll add those columns to our table. So we'll create a new column for our partner name, and then we'll say name column equals a column. That column has a name, and that name is going to be called partner name, and then it's going to have a data type, and the data type is going to be a column data types, and then you have the different data types. In this case, it's going to be a string, and then I'm going to do another column that will be the sales column, and then this one is going to be a decimal, and then we'll call this one partner sales. So we have a table, we have some columns, we now need to add the columns to the table. So we're going to say table sales info, add column. We're going to do a column where you can do the name column. And then I should definitely rename this one sale column. And then we're going to do another one, and then this will also be the sales column. You can also define things like measures, and there's some other stuff that you can do as well. So I think there's add measure, add row. You can delete rows and all sorts of different stuff like that. Measures I haven't built in yet, so I have to wait a little bit on that. But yeah, you can, I try to treat it like an object where you can add and delete. And then if you ever wanted to, you could see the content as a dictionary if you want. So we'll run this in the Python file. So you can see here, right now it's just a column, but basically the object library will take care of that for you. So this one I have to technically change that to. I should be having to do it on this one as well, but I haven't gotten there yet. I'm sorry. And then from here, we're going to define a new data set. And so I guess I could have technically done that at the top, but we'll just do it here. So we're going to have a new data set object, and at a minimum, you need a name, and then it would be a sales data set, sales info data set. We'll do sales info data set. You could technically add the tables in there too, but just for the time being. And then we can define what is defined as our default mode. In this case, we just want to push. We want to push our data set. And then we can add the table to the data set. And so we'll say new data set, add table. You can also add relationships as well. And then there's also data sources as well. And then table sales info. Again, if you want more details, don't be afraid to look at this particular resource, just because, again, I get it. It's a little bit, I'm kind of brushing over things. I'll be the first one to do it. But you can do data set mode. So in this situation, the data set mode or type. So a data set with a live connection to Azure analysis services as on-prem, push. And then you can push streaming. So there's information in here. You kind of just have to read about it. Again, I'm going to add examples so that way it's a little bit more straightforward. But I think it will make sense when you kind of do different examples and you're like, oh, okay, like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So let's do this. Let's push our new data set, and then we'll do print the new data set. Hopefully it all works. That's always the joy of this stuff. And then we're going to do post data set, and then we're going to have our data set be our new data set. All right, let's see if this all works out. I hope it does. Okay, cool. It worked. Nice. So we're going to need our dataset ID as well. So I'll just put this right here for the time being. We don't want to recreate it a second time, so I'm going to comment this code out. Let's go back into the web app and see what's all here, see what's all the dealio. So I'll go to my datasets. And then I should see sales info data set. So that looks good. Looks like everything was created. You can look at your settings if you wanted to. And there's parameters and stuff. I don't really know what you would do with all these, but you could kind of play around with it. But the important thing is our data set is there, and there's a table in our data set. So what we would need to do next is we need to add some rows to our data set. So I have some data that's already on the example one. So just to save some time, I'm going to use that one. I'll take the data from that one more specifically, just to make sure life is easy. So in this situation, you just pass through a list of dictionaries. If you're in Python, it's basically just a record set. And then you would have each row as its own dictionary. And you'd have the key as the column name, and then the value that's associated with that column name. So you can see here, I have 3 records, Alex Reed, John Reed, and James Reed. And then you have the different sales values for each one of those. So very basic, nothing super complicated, obviously. And then you would go to push data service, and then it would be post dataset rows. And then you're going to say dataset ID equals my dataset ID. Table name, so the table we just created, which is sales table info, sales table info. And then from here, you would have your rows, and your rows are just going to be your new rows. Super simple. I'll wrap it in a pretty print statement just so we can see if there's any output. I believe there's output, but we'll double check. Okay, there's no output, so I misspoke. Okay, so let's refresh it. We'll just refresh now. Oh, here it is. And then show tables. So if I go here, I can see my tables. And then I'm sure if I wanted to, I could create a report from scratch. I would see my partner name and my partner sales. I'm going to just do something very, very basic. And then we'll have the values. So there you go. So again, nothing super crazy. We have a very, very basic dashboard, but at least you can see you can take data that exists in Python, you can push it to Power BI, and then if you wanted to, then your analyst or whoever could be creating some charts from it. So pretty cool stuff, I think. And I think with that, I'm going to cut off the video because I've been going a little bit longer than I wanted to. However, at this point, if you have any questions about pushing data to a data set using dashboards and kind of just, I would say, keep it to those two resources for right now, feel free to put them down in the comments below. In our next video, we'll talk about reports, and then we'll try to cover data flows, and then we'll probably spend a little bit more time talking about using other data sources as well, just because I know a lot of people, it's about pushing the data in there. You can't really build anything if you don't have the data. So I definitely want to make sure we cover more of the data sources, but at least now you're a little bit dangerous. You can create some data sets if you wanted to, and then play around. So that's cool. So thank you again, everybody, for watching. Again, I always appreciate it. Thank you to those who really, again, help support the channel, through Patreon and through GitHub. I mean, again, this series is really because of all of you. You were helping pay all the fees, so thank you for that. And then again, like I said, at some point we'll start doing some other business services as well. I'd like to do Power App at some point. I think that'd be kind of cool. All right, everybody, we'll see you in the next video.